The key idea of this is it's the rule of law. The Constitution is the highest law of the land, not what majority wants. So you can see as you analyze that a democracy and a constitutional republic are extremely different. Welcome, everyone, to the Courageous Truth Podcast. As always, I am honored that you have chosen to spend a little bit of time with me today. This podcast exists to bring cultural and spiritual clarity to a degenerate and confused and twisted world. We use the scriptures, the Word of God, as our foundation within which to form our worldview. And I think that that is the best and strongest anchor to make sure that we are not dissuaded by the things and the lies of culture. I want to talk about something interesting today. And this is something that over the past 5 or 10 years has really been up for a major debate, which is unfortunate. I want to talk about the difference between a democracy and a republic and why those two are close knit, but why they couldn't be more further from reality. And the fact that we as America are a constitutional republic, and we hear more and more that we are a democracy, and that is becoming a talking point with politicians. And if politicians typically are pushing a narrative, or if they're trying to hijack language, we need to pay attention and understand that they're truly not on our side. If you paid any close attention over the past couple of years, you will notice that there has been a massive divide in the citizenry, a huge divide, and not over simple issues such as tax reform or land usage or things like that, but we are in a massive ideological battle, a massive ideological civil war where, in fact, the citizenry has been pushed to the margins, and there is a massive extreme divide in between what we believe, how we act, and how we talk. And even our language is different. Now, this is by design. There is a spiritual division taking place, there is a political division taking place, and there are people behind this. Because one thing you know about ruling classes is the people are easier to rule and overthrow if they are divided. We have to understand about America is that the only ones who have been pre designed, or that actually we as Americans, we have permission to overthrow our political representatives. But in any case, it's been created in such a way that to overthrow a government is in fact demonized. And we see that throughout culture. Now, as a conservative, and many of my listeners are conservatives, we have to be aware of a few things. Number one, we have to be aware that the left is hijacking our language, and the left is hijacking definitions. Our national definitions, the definition to the Constitution, the definition to our founding papers, the definition to our documents, our culture, our American way of life have been hijacked, and those definitions have been hijacked, especially when it comes to the United States Constitution. There is so much debate about the Constitution that has popped up in recent years, and in fact, the last year. And the biggest one, and I don't need to talk to you about this, is the biggest one is the 14th Amendment. And that does that mean that people who are here illegally have the same rights that we as Americans do? Now, to you and I, if we're conservatives and we have common sense, there has to be a distinction between illegal people here and rightful American citizens. If there isn't a distinction, then there is no citizenry at all. Then there is no constitution at all. Then there is no rights that Americans have at all. In fact, we are not a nation. We are just a landmass where people gather. America is an amazing place, and I talked about it on my last episode. Thank you for your support and your feedback on that topic. But what does it mean to be an American? We talked about that. Being an American is it elitist? Maybe in our values, maybe in the way we think, not because we're better, but because American ideals will lead us to the ultimate human experience, the ultimate human interaction with our land, with one another, and with our God. You see, these definitions in the Constitution and words and language have been hijacked. Why? They get away with it, those who are doing these type of things, because there is a generation that has now risen up that doesn't understand the sacred documents, the sacred words. And I'm not talking about divine, I'm talking about sacred. Some things don't have to be divine to be sacred, but our Constitution is sacred. Why? Because for generations we have enjoyed freedom. There are people all over the globe that have no freedom. They can't speak what they want. They can't walk wherever they want. They don't have that freedom of movement or that freedom of trade or that freedom of anything, even the freedom to think. They can't express that. Our Constitution guarantees those things. The problem is they don't teach the Constitution in schools. They don't teach it anywhere. In fact, you have to go to outside sources and, in fact, marginalized organizations to get any kind of education on the United States Constitution. I bring this up because there is a phrase that has become very, very popular in recent years, and a lot of Democrat politicians and left leaning ideologues have tried to make this and work to make this their mantra echo throughout our culture. And that is, this is what democracy looks like. It's like this cultic chant that they lead throughout protests and they lead throughout marches. This is what democracy looks like. And it almost becomes their mission statement, their motto, um, their calling card, that this is what democracy looks like. And people are flocking to what they believe democracy does, in fact, look like. Now, what is a democracy? Let's break this down in actual terms. According to the Webster's Dictionary, what is a democracy? A democracy is a system of government by which the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected officials. In other words, it's a system of government where elected officials have the power. Now, another definition, let me just we'll kind of summarize this a little bit differently. A democracy is a system of government in which the majority rules directly. The people vote on laws and policies themselves or through representatives, and the majority decision is final. In other words, this is majority rules. That's a democracy. The problem with that is this system can lead to what can be called the tyranny of the majority, where the rights of individuals or minority groups can be overwritten by a popular vote. Okay, so the Constitution then, in fact, we don't need majority to uphold the Constitution. We don't need majority to follow Constitution. It's already given to us. It doesn't matter if every single person in the Republic wants to steer away from the Constitution and one person against 250 million want the Constitution stands. That's the foundation of our nation, the bedrock, the Constitution, the rules, the regulations, the boundaries on citizenry, on government, the three branches, on how they are supposed to operate. That is what our Constitution holds inside of it. What a democracy does is it allows to steer away from that Constitution by a majority vote. That's why politicians love, especially Democratic politicians and many more left leaning Republicans like it, because where does the power then fall? It falls in their laps, it falls in their hands. The government wants power. And what they have done in America over the past number of decades, at least in my lifetime, is they have split us more and more and more and more. In fact, it is so bad. Now we are split over, is abortion good or bad? Is abortion good or evil? Is transgender good or evil? These are very common sense things. Obviously, a man can't be a woman and a woman can be man, but yet we have been brainwashed to think otherwise. Is abortion murder? Well, of course it's a murder, but we've been brainwashed to think otherwise. Are people who are here on our land, are they allowed to be here if they do not have permission? Common sense would say, well, of course not. Uh, the left leaners would say, well, we were here on stolen land to begin with. And that's a whole nother conversation that I'm not willing to get into right this second. But what is, like I said, the downside of a democracy is the majority rules. And sometimes the majority has a bad idea. And we know it's a bad idea because it goes against the fabric of the Constitution. Now, what's a constitutional republic? This is important. What is a constitutional republic? Why do we need the Constitution? Why is that even so important? Well, that gives us, like I said before, it gives us the foundation, the boundaries, the bedrock of how our nation is supposed to operate. This is extremely important that we have the Constitution. Why? Because it protects and guarantees the freedom of the people. The problem is people don't know the Constitution. The problem is systems of government completely disregard it. We see it in the policing system many times. We see it in bureaucrats many times. We see it in fact, in my hometown, I was at a city council meeting one time. I'm not going to say what city it was, but there was the mayor of this city stood up and said, I am going to have to suspend the rights, the First Amendments, the rights of free speech on everyone who is in here. Now, that is a tyrannical statement. They are not, he is not allowed to say that word. No governing official can suspend any rights at any time for any reason. They cannot do that. Okay? The Constitution guarantees it will never be infringed. But do we know our rights? The Constitution is not really taught in public schools anyway. And if it is, it's just glanced over. Okay. How many of you were taught the Constitution in school? Probably not many of you. And if you were, it wasn't in depth. We don't understand our rights. We need to understand the parameters of government involvement and responsibility. We elect officials to protect the Constitution, to protect our rights. And if any rights or any law or any policy or procedure goes against the Constitution, that law is null and void. But they have us so divided that we're fighting against one another. Meanwhile, they're getting away with all of these things. The definition of a constitutional republic is a form of government where the people elect representatives to make decisions, but those representatives and the majority itself are limited by a constitution that protects certain rights and principles via the Second Amendment, via the First Amendment, via the Fifth Amendment, so on and so forth. The key idea of this is it's the rule of law. The Constitution is the highest law of the land, not what majority wants. So you can see as you analyze that a democracy and a constitutional republic are extremely different. Even if most voters wanted to restrict free speech, the Constitution prohibits that and makes it illegal. The courts can strike down such a law as unconstitutional. We get it. You get into hate speech. Okay, just because you hate the speech doesn't mean that it's hate speech. Okay, you can't say certain things. Now, we don't need policy to do that. There's certain things that you should not say in public and you shouldn't say to people, but we don't need the government to create punishments around anybody who's breaking these laws that they're trying to make to kind of referee our speech. Okay, there's common courtesy as an American that would say that's higher than a law. We don't need to be babysat as human beings. How do these two collide? How does a democracy, excuse me, and a constitutional republic, how do they work together and how do they collide? Now, the democratic process, very simply put, is a political avenue in which we exercise our republic. We need the democracy as an avenue, as a method to make sure that our republic stays intact. A nation has to have laws, we have to have policies, we have to have procedures in order to function. But they don't come out of a democracy. The democracy is just kind of how, or the democratic process is how we protect the republic. When you make it a democracy, that means that the process is the rule of the land. We become a democracy and instead of a democratic process. And therefore, the republic is kind of snuffed out. We've seen it happen in Greece. We've seen it happen in other nations across the world, especially in Africa, Nigeria, other places where this has happened. A democracy can and will be used to strip the Constitution and the Republic's right away so that a majority can rule. We see that in the state of Washington. The majority rules, and the Constitution we see getting weaker and weaker. Our free speech, we see our rights to bear arms. Why do we need a right to bear arms? To overthrow the government that is restricting our republic and restricting our constitutional rights. Divide and conquer. That's what a democracy needs in order to thrive. And if you look at America, we have been divided. Looking over at this No Kings protest over this past weekend, there was a lot of things. I think that the right to protest is something that could be respected and must be protected. If you want to protest, that's totally fine. You should be able to protest whatever you want. But there are some things that we see exposed in any protest, and especially the No Kings protest. Number one, we see that they are very violent in heart. Whether they exercise violence on the streets this past weekend or not, we can see that the hearts of the No Kings protest is very violent. We see people beating up Donald Trump dolls, and we see little children holding up signs that say kill Nazis, and all these different things. And you can look at some of these videos and see some of these signs, and what some of these people are saying is it just creates there's so much hatred in their heart, and they need a democracy in order to protect what they feel and their emotions and the anger and their hatred. And when you see so many people out in the streets, it gives you empowerment that, yes, there is a majority here that feels this way. We are not a democracy where majority rules. We are a republic that stands from generation to generation, regardless of what anybody says or doesn't say. And you hear that chant. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. We are not a democracy. I don't care if everybody feels this way. We have a constitution that protects us. And the democracy and the Democrats and the left-leaning ideologues and the rhinos from the Republican Party want to strip away the strength of the foundation of the Constitution so they can bring in that democracy and thus rule the nation the way they want. All the while, we are none the wiser as the people. Why do politicians want a democracy? For that very reason, because it gives them rule and reign and power. Now, the difference, to kind of close this out, is a democracy, the power is in a majority. However, in a constitutional republic, the people, through elected officials, have the power. The power is always in the people. And when you chant, this is what democracy looks like, you are saying, I surrender my power and my voice and my republic to those who I've elected to serve and represent my ideology. That is very dangerous. Okay. What is the limits on majority? The Constitution in a republic, the Constitution restricts government and restricts a majority. Is it possible that bad ideas can be very popular? Look throughout the world. Slavery, someone had that idea and it became very popular. All right. Pedophilia is a bad idea. Sex trafficking, human trafficking is a bad idea. Higher and higher taxes is a bad idea. Okay. That doesn't mean that it's the best idea. In fact, many times the worst ideas are the most popular ideas. We should change children's gender. That is a bad idea that is accepted by many people. It doesn't matter. We have a constitution that protects rights regardless of how many people like ideas that are contrary. Okay? Protection of rights. Rights can be overridden by a majority. They can be overridden by a majority in a democracy. In a democracy, like I said before, time and time again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it gives the majority the power. In a constitution, we have already been guaranteed rights from the moment of our birth to the moment of our passing, that we have these rights and they will be protected regardless if anybody and the majority likes them or decides them. So I hope what this does is brings clarity between a democracy and a constitution. They are two very different things. We have to protect our republic, and we cannot buy into the hijacked language and the hijacked definition that would say a democracy is what we are. We couldn't be any less a democracy. A democracy is something that keeps the power in the officials and the bureaucrats and politicians, and we just have to sit back and hope they do the right thing. But in a republic, we are the ones who hold the power, control the power, and never we're not even able to relinquish it, even if we want it. So when you're out on the streets, and maybe you're an anti-Trump person, and you're out on the streets and you hear, this is what democracy looks like, this is what democracy looks like, don't fall into the deception that it is. Okay, you can hate political opponents or political officials all you want. You can protest their policies. That's fine. But you protest them because you are a republic. You don't protest them because you're a democracy. A democracy says we stand back while our officials do the protesting with their lawmakers. Okay. I live in Washington State. They love to use the term democracy because they think we're stupid enough to fall for it. But I can guarantee you this, we will not. As we close out today, many states, communities across our nation are coming into our local election primaries. It is so unbelievably important that we engage in these primaries, that we elect school board officials and legislative representatives and county council members and county auditors. This is what's important. We want to fix the things that are happening in our state, whatever's taking place. Then you need to make sure that you are voting for good people that will protect the republic and not turn this nation into a democracy, or your state or your community or wherever it is you reside. So God bless you. Thank you for tuning in to the Courageous Truth Podcast. Take these to heart. Think about, consider these things. Don't be brainwashed by politicians on both sides of the aisle that you want you to believe America is something that it's not. So God bless you. Continue to take a courageous stand for the truth, and I will see you next time.